Per usual, everything on this channel is for educational purposes only and is not intended as financial advice. It is Wednesday. Let's talk about some alts which are absolutely popping off. DXY, which is not an alt, is doing extremely poorly. And that is very, 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 very good news for risk on sentiment, which alts definitely are. DXY has been in a heavy downtrend for a couple months now. That's really given the S&P time, room to run, the NASDAQ, all of this legacy risk stuff, including, of course, crypto stuff. So I think this is definitely one to watch just on the periphery, because if DXY starts to bottom or find support around 100, which we're not close to hitting yet, and this does not look like it's hit a bottom at all to me. But when that gets there, we may see a broad sweeping bearish reversal on the crypto side and the legacy side, right? All this stuff is sort of coinciding with one another, either very much correlated or very much inversely correlated, including all of the alts, right? For the most part, all of the alts have moved together or are beginning to move together. Even the laggards like ETH are catching up. So I really think it's very important to watch this chart. If it busts below 100 and just continues its journey throughout Q1, then we're going to see some crazy prices on the crypto side for sure. If we just stack up, just take a second, look where we're at year to date on some of this stuff. On the bottom, of course, is legacy. It's gold, S&P, NASDAQ. Then I selected a few crypto and crypto equities. Solana on the top there, obviously, but Marathon, also a miner, Bitcoin miner, doing extremely well. CleanSpark, Coin. I know a lot of people have been doing really well on those trades, so that's great for the legacy side of things. Bitcoin and ETH kind of middle of the pack. So I think it's easy to get distracted by everything that's done really well so far with some expectation that that should continue. I don't think that's necessarily going to be the case. For instance, I think the meat on the bonk bone is done. I think that's over with for now. I feel the same about Solana. You don't want to be the last locust in the field when all of the wheat has been eaten, okay? If you're rotating, you're moving from field to field being a locust, in the crypto ecosystem, at least now, it feels to me like if there are easier trades elsewhere outside of the Solana ecosystem. That doesn't mean that somebody's going to mint some coin and become a millionaire 5 minutes later on Solana. I'm just saying, broadly, things look to be shifting around a little bit. Something else also to pay attention to, why alts have done so well. BTC has held up excellently here on the 8-hour cloud, held up excellently on the daily. It has survived the onslaught of attempts to push this lower. So on trend, this still looks fine, even if it breaks down below what I think to be as an ascending triangle up here. There's still a potential to return to the previous channel below the 8-hour cloud, and then we're in trouble. I don't think that's going to happen until after the ETF announcements, which is another reason why alts probably continue to run into maybe mid-January-ish. Maybe the rotation lasts until then, but ultimately I think the party's going to be over when BTC pulls back, which is inevitably going to happen, right? Also something worth watching, even though I'm guessing most people don't even care about Bitcoin anymore. So just based on the conversations I have with people. On the daily cloud, we also look fine. There's some risk for, mean reversion to the Kijun, which you can just view on the 8-hour, right? If you're below the 8-hour cloud, we're in trouble. If we're below this diagonal, we're in trouble. If we're below the Tenkin, we're in a little bit of trouble. But really what I'm watching is kind of into the later months of Q1, where we have this potential for some sort of bearish edge-to-edge play in the cloud from, let's say, 41 to 35, right? I'm talking like after the ETF, after the party's over, the lights come on, they tell you to go home, right? So this isn't like fear of happening anytime soon, but it's something that definitely worth watching into Q1, which I think would be super healthy, honestly. We'll see if we actually see that. But in the meantime, we have people like Michael Saylor just throwing 615 million at the market because he can. So that's going to help price. We also have Tether likely to be buying for their quarter end purchase, which hasn't hit the wallet yet. Just because it hasn't hit the wallet doesn't mean they haven't already purchased it, and will be moving the BTC in later on. But anyway, that's another potential whale that has been buying publicly quarter over quarter. So all in all, BTC looks good. Now dominance, which I'm generally honestly not a fan of. I talk about it because people ask me to talk about it. But the bullish channel in dominance has appeared to break down. The TA target for the range has been hit. I don't think it's over for dominance. I think, you're getting a couple weeks here and there, and we'll see what happens. Weekly cloud looks great. Historically, alts have the best moves after Bitcoin's halving. So I'd keep that in mind across the board. Just because some of these coins like Solana have moved up quite a bit doesn't mean as a group, other stuff can't, or Solana can't keep running, right? Always a possibility. And the edge to edge on total 3 would tell you as much that, look, we don't have a 2x in us from here on total 3, but we probably have a decent move to 600 billion left in us at some point. It's not going to be a straight line, most likely, but this still looks fine. And this broadly looks like every other alt chart right now. You're in some stages of this, right? Solana is up here, Bitcoin is up here, Stacks is up here, right? It just depends on what you're looking at. ETH is, in the middle, AVAX kind of in the middle, Link kind of in the middle. And these are not cycle targets. These are mean reversion of the bear trend targets. So if we get a true bullish cycle, your expectations is a measured move from the bear market higher, which I have on some of these charts I'll point out. This is total DeFi. I tried to figure out what exactly was in this, but just as an index, just poke around and see what you got. Everything pretty much looks like this. It would certainly be healthy to retest the neckline breakout across the board. Look at how many weeks in a row this thing has been green. Plenty of room for upside, right? It looks good. I don't want to sound bearish. It's just that at this point, the potential, what's your risk reward? Your risk reward on a chart that looks like this, even though you have a tailwind, you have bullishness on your side, is certainly worse than it was at 50. There wasn't an edge to edge setup just yet. So, again, it's kind of awkward because looks like it's hitting its stride a bit early relative to being inside of the cloud. I think the Bitcoin ETF stuff has really helped alts broadly. I think that's why they're hitting their stride earlier, because BTC hit its weekly move exactly what you'd expect in the weekly cloud when it started to get in the weekly cloud, basically by going sideways and slamming up against it. Anyway, ETH looks good. Finally starting to move. Even on the 3-day candles, we look great. We're just consolidating. Zooming in, this is a inverted head and shoulders. I'll look at that in a second. The multi-year pitchfork still says you have room to run back to the midline at the least, right? Even if this does not see crazy highs again, like it did above the PF in 2021, at the very least, you'd expect a midline touch, which would be an all-time high for ETH. You can also look at the log curve zones, is what they're called on TradingView, this indicator. Similar to like the power law corridor stuff for Bitcoin, it looks exactly where you'd expect. It is lagged heavily, but it's also at the bottom of this zone. And the midpoint for this chart is basically 7 to 10K. It depends on when we get there. But certainly one to watch into earlier stages of 2024, which is when ETH does best historically. And this, of course, the weekly cloud, ascending triangle, yearly pivot, still looks good. Still on the table. Everything looks fine. Just because many alts have left the stratosphere in a rocket ship doesn't mean ETH still can't have a move. The TA is still very favorable for a move between 28 and 31. What I'd love to see across the board is on ETF week, let's say, that we get approvals for Bitcoin. We see some crazy moves, some crazy wicks. We get crazy retracements, and then we spend the next 4 to 6 months kind of repairing that wick, right? Where we kind of fill that in throughout 2024. We give all the moving averages time to catch up. We'll see what actually happens, but that would be the easiest to trade. What's difficult is if this goes straight up to like 3,200 plus, and all the moving averages look stretched, kind of like Solana. The daily doesn't really tell you anything on the cloud. It's hugged the Tenkin, which is great. Still looks bullish, still looks fine. On the 8 hour, however, I do think there's a trade here. On the long side, it has consolidated for almost the entirety of December at this point, painted a pretty nice looking inverted head and shoulders. It's above 8 hour cloud again, has a bullish TK cross in the 8 hour. Kind of a similar setup to November, target in this case being 25-ish, let's say. But we may see that move higher with the attempt to hit that weekly edge-to-edge target. Now, something that doesn't need to exist has no reason to exist, but is a foil to ETH would be ETC. The only reason I'm talking about this chart is because the cloud looks amazing. This has been down only for 3 years. And if there's ever a chance for this thing to move, it's going to be this cycle based on the TA. So we'll see if TA can truly be powerful here and actually pull this thing higher, because it looks great. It's a 3-day bullish breakout on the cloud, bullish Kumo twist. Everything looks really good for ETC, which is bizarre for me to say out loud. And then if we want to look at the ETH Beta ecosystem or layer 2s, staking, all of those charts are kind of a variation on the theme of ETH in that they have some sort of ascending triangle characteristics and or follow ETH pretty closely on the correlations, roughly. If we look at ARB, Lido, Optimism, I'm sure there are more that look like this, but it's worth just knowing what's out there and what's behaving similarly, what's leading, what's lagging in the ecosystem relative to other ecosystems, right? There's always a relative value play somewhere. So collectively, these all look bullish to me. OP, we've been talking about this for a couple of weeks now. Very similar to ETH again, right? Mega ascending triangle, broke out, hit its target. Can this keep going? Sure. Do I think there are better relative value plays now that this has hit its measured move target? I do. That doesn't mean, it's in price discovery, right? This could go to 10, I don't know. But I do think there are better relative value plays out there. Lido, very similar, right? Ascending triangle all day. Looks like ETH breaking out. Looks good for higher. I don't know if it sees 4, but that's where it wants to go based on the technicals. ARB hasn't been traded as long. It's had a decent reversal in September, October, double bottom there, and it's had decent moves higher. So I think collectively this ecosystem stuff, right, looks okay. And to me, it makes me even more bullish on ETH USD if the rest of this stuff has moved pretty hard so far. Binance unfortunately never hit $50. You can thank probably the US justice system for reeling in CZ and maybe saving that company from more distress. I don't know. Pretty convincingly breaking above the diagonal, which it hadn't been able to do for the past 3 years. Similar to ETC. I mean, look, this chart looks good. I'm not going to deny it. It survived at 200, maybe because Binance was selling user assets to support that price. I don't know. That's what people are saying, but chart is the chart. Looks good. Clearly an inverted head and shoulders down here as well. And if we're talking cycle highs, can this thing hit 1,000? I think that'd be pretty wild. I wouldn't touch this because of regulatory reasons, and who knows what sort of headlines you're going to run into, but that would be the all-time high extension on BNB for sure, 1,000 plus. Solana, again, this field I think has been picked, right? The locusts have come and gone for the most part here. I think relative value is elsewhere at this point. Massive wealth effect for the Solana ecosystem. Obviously, you've got people rotating violently from coin to coin, but this looks to me like it wants to consolidate before moving higher. Claude likes 80 as a retest. Pitchfork is 45 degrees. Everything looks okay here trend-wise. I just think it's going to take some time to reconsolidate. And if we zoom in on the 4-hour, this does not look like a pattern. Is it a head and shoulders? I don't know, but it doesn't look like a continuation pattern in the moment. So it makes sense to me that Sol chills out a little bit. In some of these other charts, they've kind of hit their, Link is another one, where they've hit their multi-month consolidation targets based on fibs. They've hit their 1618 or measured move targets. Yes, they're in the weekly cloud. Yes, they have potentially a crazy move higher, right? But now it's a matter of what does the consolidation up here look like? Do we continue to see a markup phase type of activity? Or do we attempt to retest the breakout zone? Right now, it looks like we want continuation. It looks very much like Link, ADA, charts that look like this, want to see higher highs. Do I think we hit 170 before we retest 42? I don't. But I'm sure there are people who disagree with me. I think if you can get 42, you take it on a re-entry. I think we eventually hit 170, but I just think you got to be careful with charts that are already up 8, 9, 10 weeks in a row, expecting, another 100% move in the near term. 8-hour looks really good for ADA. Cloud has captured this beautifully. Multiple Kijun bounces. TK lines have held bullish the entire time. It almost looks like this attempted for a head and shoulders and is sort of morphing into an ascending triangle just broadly with the market, right? Everything kind of wants this uplift at the moment, and the 8-hour cloud still says it looks good. So I do like continuation there. AVAX is another example of it's sort of hit its multi-month consolidation targets. Yes, there is room to run the weekly, but really what is this going to look like in 2024, right? Do you get an attempt to pull back to 20? I don't know. If you do, I think you take it, but it's, it's in this awkward middle zone from a risk reward perspective where some of these coins are not going to retrace on their own, but as a group, when everything inevitably has some sort of mean reversion, I think that's the trade that you take, and then you expect, a 4x from 20 to 80 or something on AVAX. So yes, it looks good. Have I given up on an edge trade on a chart that looks like this? No, but you got to read the room a little bit. This is going to could take 6 months, could take us into 2025, right? This could look really gross inside the weekly cloud at this point. That's why the better trade is always, catching the cloud on the bottom. Obviously this hit the weekly cloud in the middle super early, but still looks fine. In the grand scheme of things, on the daily, to me, this looks tired. I don't have RSI on here, but there was a bearish divergence. I just think, again, there are better fields to be a locust, AVAX, Sol. I think there's better things to trade. DOGE has had a multi-month consolidation, hasn't hit the weekly cloud yet. This to me is a great spot bag potential, not financial advice, but this is the type of chart where I think it's safe in speculative mania to expect a 2x from 10 cents. Anything above that is a bonus, but I like the way this is setting up into next year. DOT is tough because, there's not really an ecosystem. At least Sol has this casino mentality going on for it. DOT, I don't know enough about to even guess whether that exists, but I don't think it does. Anyway, Cloud still likes it. 29 would be the target. I think anything from here to 0 is fine, but you got to give it tons and tons of time. We're going to be talking about the same chart in 6 months from now. MATIC had a risk of a M double top on the daily. It's sort of getting back into the weekly. It's got this multi-month Adam and Eve situation. I just think there's better stuff to trade. I think there are a lot of people who are trapped in this, and ultimately, until it's bullish on the weekly, I just don't think it's worth even thinking about. So I think you've got a long time for that chart to really run in earnest, because it's been range bound for so long at this point. Link similar to ADA. To me, this looks better than ADA. It's held this range for 6 or 7 weeks now. Looks like ascending triangle type behavior on lower time frames, and you just got to be patient. Not all of this stuff can run extremely hot week over week like Solana. So I do like 30 eventually from here, just as a mean reversion play. So probably a 2x left in that. Adam had this bullish bat thing, harmonic, that I didn't trade. I didn't talk about it a lot, but it has played out pretty nicely if you were playing that. Not in the weekly cloud yet. Looks okay for a 2x from here. But, again, it's kind of at the whim of everything. If everything pulls back, Adam probably retests 10 or something like that. But it looks fine. No bullish TK cross on that yet on the weekly. Uni in the weekly cloud, bullish TK cross. This is another one like BNB that looked like initially it wanted to break down and just survived. So that's at least a 2x from here. Again, you're at the whim of the entirety of the market, but the cloud likes it at this level on the weekly. So that looks very good. 3-day ICP kind of looks like AVAX, right? Where it had that downtrend channel, broke out. Looks okay. Some sort of bull flag there. Looks ready for continuation. IMX. I think in the near term, a lot of these like lower mid-cap coins are going to be harder to continue to run. Again, they're going to be higher beta to everything. They're going to move harder than layer ones or other layer ones. I would just get nervous buying up here. You've reached the consolidation measured move target. You're way above the 2-day Tenkin and Kijun. So I just think there's better relative value stuff on TA to trade. INJ has hit its extension target, right? So if you want to look at any other alt, this would be the same way to analyze it. Look for those weekly cloud levels, look for bottoming ranges, look for continuation chart patterns like ascending triangles, and using the fibs, the previous all-time high with the bear market low, that will give you this range. So that's been hit at this point. Now INJ can keep going. But again, I just think there's other stuff at this point from a relative value perspective. That's a better trade. Doesn't look bearish, doesn't look immediately ready to mean revert, but lots of things have lagged this chart at this point. You know, night and day, right? I don't know much about either of these products. I know Filecoin is kind of a joke. I know they've got supply issues, but if I'm rotating around, am I going to keep an initial bag of INJ? Sure. But what would I rotate into would be something like this, which still hasn't broke above its consolidation. Looks great on the 3-day cloud, you know, similar to ETC in that respect, where it's really been down only for several years, finally making an attempt to break resistance. This looks good. You know, where does this go? What's the 50% move from all-time high to low? That would be the initial mean reversion target. So maybe that's 20, 30, 40, 50. I don't know, somewhere in there. But this chart looks very good from a TA perspective. Stacks, I mentioned this earlier, as being part of the Bitcoin ecosystem, it's certainly benefited. It's benefited that it had a price less than $1 from a unit bias perspective. And it's basically hit the weekly cloud target. So again, can this keep going? Obviously, right? You know, look at Bitcoin. Bitcoin hit its weekly cloud target super quick and kind of stalled out. Let other things run. At these levels, the next question is, will it consolidate? Will it retrace? Will it mean revert? That isn't a short entry. It's just like, look, the meat of the trade is done, right? The field has been picked. The meat on the bone is gone. So the next step would be some sort of bullish confirmation down the road. As far as a cycle high, you know, just again, take the all-time high, take the low, fib that out, and that'll give you a decent target for the cycle. Lastly, RUNE. This is probably the worst looking alt right now, I'd imagine. You know, it's ranged for a couple months. It was really one of the first movers in October, maybe setting up for a reversal here. It's not going to reverse on its own, most likely, but it's going to easily reverse if everything starts to look a little weak, which I think is going to be tough until mid-January. So collectively, things look really good. It's hard not to make money right now. I hate saying that, but it's true. So for 2024, I think you want to set yourself up for some cozy long-term bags to get comfortable in and have conviction. Make sure the setups look good, you know, and lean on the TA. That's certainly what I'm doing. That's all I have for this one. Like, dislike, comment, share, subscribe, and happy trading.